Welcome to Voices of Biocomplexity, conversations inspired by complexity. I'm Erin Raymond from the University of Virginia's Biocomplexity Institute, and in each conversation we explore how data, modeling, and interdisciplinary science help us understand the interconnected challenges shaping our world. Today's conversation started with a question I couldn't answer myself. Why are diseases we thought we understood still becoming major public health stories? Recent measles outbreaks in the United States have renewed questions about vaccination, while Ebola continues to emerge in parts of Africa, reminding us that infectious diseases remain a global challenge. Joining me for this conversation are two of the Institute's infectious disease experts, Bryan and Srini Venkatraman. They develop large-scale computational models that help public health officials respond to disease outbreaks and understand the complex interactions that shape how diseases spread through populations.
I'm Bryan Lewis. I'm a computational epidemiologist. I work at the Biocomplexity Institute and been studying infectious disease, building models, and either helping guide response to outbreaks or write papers about policies and things that would help keep them under control.
For a long time,
for over 2 decades.
Yeah, a long time.
I'm Srini Venkatraman. I'm a research assistant professor at the Biocomplexity Institute, and I've been with the group for over a decade now. I just
Crazy.
thought about it, and then it's a lot of it has been consumed by COVID. I cut my teeth into infectious disease modeling with the group, and I do a lot of data science and computational model development, and in assistance of a lot of these response-based studies, but also trying to extract scientific questions from that can be investigated with other partners.
Right. And what I wanted to talk to you guys about today were these two diseases, outbreaks, I don't know the right terminology, that I kind of thought we were done with. I felt like, those were in the past, and that's Ebola and measles. Measles closer to home, obviously. Ebola. I thought that we were done. Ebola, I remember Ebola popped up. I think it was in the 90s, maybe early 90s.
I mean, it's been going off and on here and there, but yeah.
Right. Because I read a book called Outbreak or something, and it was like, ooh, this is just like that. Oh my gosh, And so, of course, the internet was not really a thing, which is good and bad. And so then Ebola kind of went away, and then it came back big time, 2014.
2014, West Africa was the biggest one we've seen.
Right. And then kind of went away and then back again. So what is happening there with Ebola?
That's a tricky question. I mean, it's still not fully understood, the dynamics of where it circulates in the animal reservoir, as we call it.
Okay.
So the virus isn't going away. It's in some host. It's not completely clear. People have implicated bats. It also gets into other animals that often people end up eating. Sometimes that might be the initial spillover event, gets it into the human population.
Right.
But yeah, this virus has been around for a while. I think it was originally discovered somewhere in the 40s or the 50s and got its name from there. This particular one is a virus that was discovered a while ago, but we haven't seen very many human outbreaks of it. There's only been a couple of them. This Bunjimbuyu, I can't pronounce it, Bunjimbugyo, something like that.
It's fun to say, though.
Yeah, exactly. I'd love to hear
someone say it.
Someone from the Congo say it a couple of times so I can actually hear how they pronounce it. But there's 4 flavors of what we consider Ebola. And there's a lot of these hemorrhagic fevers that have different classifications, and the virologists are always slightly tweaking it here and there as we understand them more and more. Unfortunately, we don't have a vaccine against this particular flavor. So the West Africa one was from the Zaire strain of this.
Okay.
And they developed a vaccine against it, but with this one, we don't have a vaccine. And so people are scrambling to try and get those trials out and get something developed soon.
Right. So you talk about the animal reservoir. I know with measles, we don't talk about that. Right. So why don't we talk about that? Why are they what's different.
Yeah, different viruses have different survival capability in different hosts. And I think with measles, it's mainly humans. I might be able to survive in certain other animals, but not long enough. And so it's really just in humans. So if we did get everyone free of measles all at once, like we do with smallpox, it could be eliminated eradicated from the face of the earth. But we haven't quite gotten there yet. And we're close. We're getting close here in the US. But we've certainly taken a step back here in these last couple of years.
Right. Okay. So let's go to measles and spreading and all of that. I want to know about what we do.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so what is the role of the Institute in looking at measles and looking at Ebola? How do we look at them differently? Mm-hmm. That kind of stuff.
So when we approach any outbreak, there are multiple components to it. There's a biological component to it, mm-hmm. and then there is a social component.
Yes.
And then what you know in terms of the clinical characteristics and how you can prevent it. So one thing between these two diseases, like there's very different biological characteristics, mm-hmm. Bryan was alluding to. Also in terms of things that we notice for an outbreak is how quickly can it spread, how quickly can it kill its host, and like what are the modes of transmission and so on. So in that, like this is a good study in contrast because like measles is one of the most contagious viruses that we've known. Like it's like there's a number that we use to characterize how contagious this is. If you've seen the movie Contagion, you would have seen I don't know, Kate Winslet probably explains it on the whiteboard. So this notion of R naught is what they call it, basic reproduction number, which is
R sub zero. Yeah, R naught. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So if you drop one infectious individual in a population of susceptibles, how many people does that person infect before he recovers? So that's the essence of it. And for measles, it's like in the 12 to 18 range.
Oh my goodness.
And for comparison, smallpox is like 5 to 7. And like Omicron, which was one of the most infectious variants that we saw for COVID, that's anywhere between like 7 to 14.
Wow.
So this is one of the most.
Yeah, measles is high. Yeah.
On the other side, Ebola has like a very high case fatality rate. In terms of R naught itself, if you look at Ebola, it will land in like 1.5 to 2.5 range, slightly more infectious than seasonal flu, but not as much as measles. But what differentiates it is the high case fatality rate. And in a lot of times, we also notice that diseases that have high case fatality rate are also self-limiting because they kind of kill the host before they try to pass on to others.
Yeah.
And so that's one big difference in terms of biological characteristics. And then you come to the modes of transmission. Measles is mostly airborne, and like you also have like fomic transmission, surface-based transmission. Whereas for Ebola, it's based on contact with bodily fluids. And the final thing is that also drives different kind of control measures. For measles, we've had a vaccine for quite a while. So the primary push in kind of eliminating measles for many countries, like getting to like a population level coverage.
Right.
And that essentially tells you, like, as we talked about this R naught, base R naught is like this 12 to 18 number is like when the entire population is susceptible. So if you vaccinate enough number of people, then you kind of bring down the effective R naught, which is basically if you bring that below 1 for any individual that comes in, the epidemic would die out. So and that's like 95% is the target that people want to achieve for measles. Whereas in the context of Ebola, since it's a very local contact, like density-driven disease, you have to understand contact tracing, like looking at people who came in contact with an infected individual, and also look at if you have vaccines. We don't have for the current virus, but we had for the previous West African one. You kind of do what they call ring vaccination, which is vaccinate everyone who kind of came in contact with or like got exposed to the virus. So in a way, all of these methods need to be studied, without like actually trying it out in the population, right? So that's where our group brings in our expertise in both representing populations, but also a lot of these dynamics on populations. So we build like synthetic representations and then simulate the spread of these diseases and then say, okay, what would happen if we vaccinate this many people? Or what would happen if we institute safe burials for Ebola? So that's where we come in. And I think every disease throws up a different challenge. But I think our group has over the years developed a rich enough suite of tools that can tackle most of these diseases.
That's how I originally got involved in the Ebola outbreak, is that we've become a little bit of specialists of taking bizarre questions that come up and rapidly trying to build a model and a representation of it so that we can answer it in the computer before people go try it out in the real world, or at least it can guide the decisions that they're making. So originally with Ebola, there's this experimental treatment that had been developed by the military, and they had like enough doses, like 50 or 100 doses of this treatment, and they thought maybe we can stamp out this outbreak that we've seen early on.
Right.
What would its size need to be? How would we go about doing it if we really wanted to do this, or if we wanted to protect a certain population that we were most interested in, or whatever? And so that's where we came in and started getting involved in it. And unfortunately, by the time they detected it, there's always one of these things. By the time you detect an outbreak, it's often too big to really slow down. And at this point, 100 doses was going to be more of a drop in the ocean, and it wasn't going to be effective enough. But it was going to be useful for protecting healthcare workers that might be able to then provide the isolation and supportive treatment and keep the people who were ill. So that was an initial use of it in the early stages of that West Africa outbreak.
Right.
With our work with the military, we've taken a lot of these sort of case studies where it is this disease. Like we even looked at, was it measles in Romania? I think at one time we were looking at outbreaks of measles in Romania, one of an ally, and they were having a little trouble controlling it. And so we became experts in reading Romanian, building a representation of that population and looking at where, it was likely to spread next, so that the government of Romania could sort of implement control measures a little bit more effectively.
And that's what I was actually thinking about, was scenario modeling and kind of what that means. So we have this synthetic population, but we don't just run it through once and say, oh yeah, if you do all this, this is what's going to happen. We, with our partners, create scenarios that they think would be useful, right? And then we're like, well, what if it's, this, what if there's 100 people? What if there's 600 people? What if they're dancing? I don't know, what if they're like overexerting themselves? What if they're whatever, are they in their cars? And we have a look at all kinds of data for that, right? Like we layer this data. So we have mobility and general census and geography and all of that.
Right, exactly. I mean, that's what this whole framework is set up for. It's the world of what ifs. Whenever you're trying to make a complicated decision, you're always curious. What if I did this? What if I did that? Well, what if I didn't do as much of that and a little bit more of that somewhere in between the two? Yeah. And that's what is useful doing this in a computer, because all you're doing is using a little bit of extra electricity. You can generate another trajectory of a possible world that might exist if you did a little bit more of this and a little bit less of that.
Right.
And so to do that, like you were just saying, we need to synthesize a lot of different information. And so in my mind, the way that these models are really useful is for integrating different data. Not all data is just like a data set that you download, like the census data or the mobility from cell phone records or something of that nature, but is also process. And so it's like an action that does happen. Like, what are people likely to do when they become sick? We kind of know that, but it's not just a data set you download. So you can build in these behaviors that sort of, as a person evolves in an illness or some other effect, like having lost power or being told to evacuate, they can make decisions. And then as the world that we've been simulating evolves, they get put into different situations. And because we know the sort of rules of behavior, you can imbue that into these people and allow them to take different trajectories. And that's how we can get into this sort of richer representation of what if we did a little more of this and a little bit less of that?
Yeah.
And you can create a whole distribution of possible futures that would arise, which is a little richer than oftentimes a statistical style approach where you're looking at likelihoods and you just sort of land 57%, which sometimes isn't as useful as the full distribution of how you got to that 57%.
And then people, unlike the weather forecasting, people might see these predictions and then they change their behavior, which makes it really convenient that we can then go back in and say, okay, well, actually now, all of this is happening. And so, okay, people were listening to what we said, which then kind of makes us look like we were wrong. Like, I mean, that's a danger, not a danger, but that's a consequence for us is like, you guys don't know what you're talking about. You said 75% of people were going to be infected with something. And then they weren't because we warned everyone, hey, if you keep doing what you're doing.
Right. Certain actions happen and maybe it's not. It's always great to be wrong about that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Predicting disaster and disaster is averted because actions took place that changed the course.
Right. We wanted to put these two diseases together in this episode to talk about these two things at the same time, but they are different. But what are their similarities that you see, like in why we put them together? Do we look at them the same way? Do we, as the modelers, just look at them the same way?
So in a lot of ways, depending upon the phase of the outbreak that you're in, some different diseases might exhibit similar characteristics. So like, for example, if even during COVID, we saw this, like in the initial importation phase, you're interested in like which region is at risk for the next thing. But once it's established in a region, you're more worried about how quickly is it growing, what would different kind of interventions do. So in that sense, different kind of models would come into play. So in the context of Ebola, for example, right now, since it's a very localized outbreak in the DRC with probably some spillover into Uganda, the question is still like, we have a kind of framework called agent-based models where we're looking at interactions of individuals at a very like micro scale. And so those kind of models will be very useful to understand impact, say, safe burials or looking at potential treatment or isolation policies. Whereas once it's started to infect multiple regions and you're trying to look at a risk for other regions in DRC or like risk for other countries, then you start to zoom out. And so a representation at individual level doesn't make sense. Or I mean, it still makes sense, but it's too cumbersome to kind of pull in all the data. And maybe you're taking a hammer to some place where you don't need a hammer.
Right.
So you start looking at what we call meta-population models, where kind of group individuals and then look at just rates at which these population groups come in contact with each other. But then in some cases, you don't have good representations of these subpopulations, or you're just trying to understand like in a very abstract sense, like for example, during COVID, like when multiple variants are competing for like the population, you just care about those biological characteristics of those variants, and you just want to study them in a very normative population. So then you kind of even zoom out a bit and just do like differential equation-based models, which just assume like everyone mixes with everyone, but let's study these dimensions of the problem in much more detail. Right. So in a lot of ways, for these different diseases, depending upon what you're trying to study and what data you have access to, you could use the same models or different models.
Okay. And the whole differential equation thing, all the different models, that's a different episode. So look for that because we'll break all those down. I want to break those down into bite-sized chunks because that's a lot of information. What you said. So now thinking and outside of just public health, let's say, with both of these diseases, but particularly I think in Africa, where we've seen the cases of Ebola, what is the bigger impact of Ebola on the population itself? Are they changing behaviors in other ways? I mean, there's a lot of stuff happening in that part of the world that is affecting supply chains of all different things. So it's a busy region. There's a lot going on. And now there's also this going on too. So do you have any kind of feeling for what's happening there or what could happen there if Ebola continues to spread? Like, is there going to be any economic impacts or social impacts that are bigger?
Right. I think with the West Africa outbreak, we did see initially like travel restrictions going in place and making it more difficult for people to move between places, which can sort of impact trade and could also affect just other things more broadly. But in general, in this area, there's a lot of things going on in terms of civil unrest. There's different groups that are at war with each other or at least battling each other. There's a lot of internally displaced people. And Uganda is sitting there right across the border from the most affected regions and health zones in the DRC. And they've been getting some of the patients. They've not been reporting a lot of local transmission.
Okay.
But it's interesting to think about just sort of the geopolitical aspect of the fact that there's these battles going on over there. The borders are kind of a little bit loose in some areas, maybe more so than Uganda would prefer. And so whenever there's a pandemic, it's often either a symptom of or a catalyst for other more political and social kinds of things that may require other actions or interventions beyond just sort of public health measures to bring the disease under control as as those things sort of evolve.
Right. I mean, as we saw, which kind of, segues back to the measles kind of nicely, right? Like there was a lot of restriction and now we've got this pushback against vaccines and now we're back to measles.
And the other thing that happened in the global stage, for example, like I was looking up kind of what kind of activities happen in the T20 province. It looks like there's a lot of gold mining that happens in that region. And there's a lot of like porous borders between like South Sudan, DRC, and also to Uganda, as Bryan mentioned. And so there's a lot of, as you said, like supply chains may get affected, but more importantly, for DRC itself, there will be a lot of attention on this outbreak from the global side, and other countries might want to, like, there's a lot of distrust in like publishing data. Like, I mean, we're kind of going back and forth. Like, there's a lot of effort from other countries trying to understand these outbreaks, trying to mobilize resources, but the countries themselves, as we saw during COVID, like when you publish actual data, then you invite more attention, and it might have economical repercussions for your country. So, like, for example, even in the Uganda case, almost all the cases, they've made it very clear that they're either from DRC or they got exposed to it in DRC, or it's for healthcare workers who are treating people who got exposed in DRC. So these are messages that will get communicated in very clear terms by different countries as the outbreak evolves. And the other thing, again, expanding on the conflict zone, there's also like public distrust that will grow as for example, foreign agencies or like other people come and start setting up healthcare, like emergency hospitals and so on. And there's like, it's an ongoing conflict zone, and so there's a lot of power struggles. And like one thing that we saw in a recent part, like 2018, there was an outbreak in DRC in the same region, and we saw like reports of hospitals getting attacked. Like, because that's one thing that they can actually kind of, it becomes another pawn in their territorial battle. So those are the things that actually aggravate the situation, because you don't get a clear view into the problem that's unfolding, and you can't even intervene. So just sit and watch and until it starts landing in other parts of the world.
Well, one thing that is nice with this particular Ebola outbreak, and also I guess to some degree with the measles outbreak, is you can see some of the progress that has been made. When we were involved in the 2014 Ebola outbreak in West Africa and some of the subsequent ones, there was a little bit less overall international collaboration. And I think with the experience of going through COVID and sort of altruism and the spirit of teamwork that sort of arose during that particularly acute crisis, we've seen some of the infrastructure get built out, and we've seen more of a spirit of collaboration. That's very nice. The WHO has set up something called the collaboratory, and it is a mechanism where they are actually sharing slides and meeting notes and data. The humanitarian data exchange was in its infancy in 2014, and we actually used that resource quite a bit for some of our work over the years, but it is even more so providing lots of different data. And so that's really nice to see. And then I think also just sort of at the state level with measles, I think that they've always been good about putting things out, but the technology to do that has improved a little bit. And so now there's like active dashboards that are being updated know, on a weekly or bi-weekly basis that are showing what the outbreak is, communication to healthcare providers. My wife's a primary care doc. She's reading the VDH page quite a bit more because she's concerned about having a patient show up that might be have measles. And so that's been a nice thing to see, whereas 10, 15 years ago, these efforts were still there. The spirit was still there, but the ability to carry it out was maybe a little bit less strong. And so for us as modelers, we always want more data. The world is awash with data nowadays. Getting a hold of it and getting it into the right shape is always a challenge.
Yeah.
But that is something that, really excites us when we get to see, here's this new data set, or here's this new problem.
Right.
Here's a way that we can build the mechanisms of things that we already have on the shelf, and extend them in certain ways to answer a new kind of question. Those are the kinds of problems that really excite us. And so we are always looking for partners that can bring a new kind of problem into the space. And we've got tools. We've been gotten very adept at sort of how do we fit this piece together and this piece together that's already on the shelf, build out something else that glues it all together, that can address a particular question or problem that someone brings to us.
Yeah.
And also on the side of science, like I think what COVID has done in good and bad is like put models front and center.
Yes.
I remember like when I joined the group as a postdoc, that was the time the group was kind of exiting the wartime mode for Ebola response. And there was a lot of talk about one of the models that came out of CDC, which was like they predicted like about 1 million cases with all the caveats saying that nothing else is done and so on. But all that got the attention was there might be 1 million cases. So and it's not like during COVID we didn't have any such episode, but over time, even scientists have gotten a better understanding of how to communicate results, how to couch it in uncertainty, but also like all these scenarios that you talked about, put them front and center. And one of the things that has emerged during COVID, and it's continuing even now, is a scenario modeling hub that we are part of. So we've now done like across 3 diseases, COVID, flu, and RSV. And it's a group of scientists who have kind of aligned on the mission, which is something that goes beyond just like outbreaks. Like for example, when a novel outbreak comes in, there's a lot of funding and there's a lot of interest. So there's like a lot of competitive spirit. And sometimes they build collaborative models, but it's between like known networks. But what has emerged is recently, even in forecasting, like ensemble models, which is like combining a lot of different models, seems to do better. And again, it avoids groupthink. It avoids like just listening to one expert. So what has emerged is like a rich network. And even now there is discussion of can we do an Ebola hub? And not just the group of scientists, but as Bryan said, like the infrastructure for building such models or like data collection, all of those have been standardized in a way that you could quickly pivot to a new disease and invite modelers who are probably experts in that disease and expose this technology. And in terms of new data sets, one of our collaborators from our MIDAS project, which is funded by NIH, we are part of a coordination center for modeling infectious diseases. And one of our collaborators there from Cornell, she's actually compiled a really good data set. This is Anna Bento. I can point you to the paper in the show notes. So she's actually collected a very rich data set across 13,000 school districts and 50,000 schools in the US, looking at measles or like MMR vaccine coverage. They've done like a tremendous job, and using that, they've actually done some targeted modeling studies to say like how much the community risk has gone up recently. And so in our group, we have folks who have actually developed methods to detect these under-immunized clusters. So I see a very nice partnership between such resources. So earlier it used to be that one scientist has to go end-to-end, like collect the data, do modeling. So at some point, they're limited by their weakest link. So probably they're not great at data collection or sophisticated modeling. But with these collaborative efforts, someone can just go full on data collection mode, get the most curated data set, and then pass it on to a group of modelers who can throw the most fancy tools at it and then try to get insights from it.
Yeah. I know. I mean, COVID was terrible. Don't get me wrong, but silver lining to that rain cloud, I think, was more of this understanding that, okay, we need to quit like keeping everything secret to ourselves, and we need to reach out and work together.
We're stronger together than we are apart.
Yes, against this little thing that we can't see. It's very important. Thank you for joining us for this conversation. I'm Erin Raymond, and this has been Voices of Biocomplexity. If you enjoyed today's discussion, you can find more conversations, videos, and stories from the Biocomplexity Institute on our website, YouTube channel, and your favorite podcast platform. Until next time, stay curious, and thanks for listening.